You guys know how much I love villains, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish gave us a wide variety of villains, among which was the majestic Jack Horner, an incredible character that brought back all of the entertainment of classic Disney baddies, with some self-aware commentary on the state of how villains are written in movies nowadays. However, while this movie has an excellent comical bad guy to fill up most of the active threat role, when people usually think of the main antagonist of this movie, they think of the scary Wolfman. And I think it's interesting that he's settled into the role of primary antagonist, because I don't think he's a very good character. I mean, I like him a lot. I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't, but to me, he was always supposed to be a larger-than-life figure, a representation of Puss's inner torment that initiates the journey and lets Puss grow and mature. But as an independent character, I don't think he works all that well. Want me to prove it? What's his name? Yeah, I bet you all said different things. Go around online and you'll see people calling him Death or Wolf or Lobo Muerte, which is literally just Death Wolf in Spanish. Well, guess what? His name is Wolf. That's what it says in the credits. The fact that most people call him Death goes to show that they like the wolf more for the impact that he has in the story rather than for his actual personality. And to me, that is what makes him such a wonderful villain. Just not as good as Jack Horner. The wolf is not about his character, but rather about his presence. Being the personification of death, his role in the story is to humiliate Puss and show him that life is not to be taken for granted. So the writers have to make sure that every scene he is in is as anxiety-inducing as possible. And boy do they succeed. From the second he appears on screen, you go, oh yeah, Puss gonna die. But the movie tries to play it cool, since this is his introduction. First they have some playful banter about how strong they are and how weak the other is, which doesn't mean much since you don't really know the true nature of the wolf. Plus, it's Puss in Boots, right? The famous fearless hero. He'll surely win, right? No! Rule number 1 of establishing a threatening villain: make them clap the hero's cheeks. Puss gets his cheeks clapped so hard that he gets PTSD. How many animated kids movies show their heroes get maimed in battle and get reduced to trembling in fear? This is not only horrifying for Puss, but it is also highly upsetting as a viewer, because even though you don't know that the wolf is the embodiment of death, you can already tell that he's not a normal being in the universe. As a character, he has no actual stake in the plot, but that's because the plot is irrelevant to him. It's beneath him, and this larger-than-life aura is what makes him so scary. And this is where a lesser movie would fail, because writing a character that is this one-dimensional and single-minded creates a slight problem in the narrative. He's kinda boring. I mean, yeah, the scenes he's in are nice and tasty, but that's because the movie knows he would get boring the longer he appears on screen. If he was in the movie for too long, his confidence act would get kinda grating and cliche. His precious fear factor would be lost and the character would succumb to cringe. Therefore, his appearances have to be cut short. In fact, in the entire movie, the wolf only has 3 scenes where he actually does something. That's about 5 minutes of screen time. With that little time, the movie's going to be lacking an essential villain figure. Who will save our precious Wolfie from being spread too thin?
What took you so long, idiot?
Jack Horner is what saves the wolf in this movie. It's not unusual for a movie to have a double trouble villain combo, where one of them's a silly and goofy comic relief character, while the other is this cool, unstoppable force. By having that duality, the funny villain creates a contrast in behavior that elevates the other as a more serious threat. And while these pairs usually come in a master-servant relationship, another way for them to appear is for the real villain to show up at key points in the story and for the comical character to be a more recurrent threat. That way, the smaller villain can spend much more time on the spotlight and be more laid back, but when the story needs to get the real stuff, the cooler villain can take center stage and make those moments just that more special.
Surprise!
As I said before, the wolf is all about those special moments. Without Jack Horner, the wolf would be an afterthought in this movie. The scenes with him would feel repetitive, and the scenes without him would be aimless. And most importantly, since Jack Horner is allowed to take most of the jokes in the movie, the wolf can be dead serious in his scenes. We have seen way too much of movies that try to have serious villains but then try to make them funny. and it's always bad. I mean, you're ruining this for me. I wanted to watch an evil bad guy do horrible things to innocent people and relish in their misery, but all you've given me is a joke. So now you have this terrifying villain who is super powerful and has been featured doing nothing but clapping cheeks. However, there's a small issue with making the villain unbeatable, is that they have to be beaten. How can it be done? What will Puss do? I mean, it's not like he can just inexplicably get better at fighting in that short amount of time, right? Well, no, but actually yes. Even though the conflict between Puss and the wolf is portrayed through a fight, the actual meaning behind it is something deeper. The wolf isn't just death, he is the culmination of Puss's anxieties. By being a hero who has felt invincible all of his life, having to come to terms with his own mortality is too much to accept. Instead of living with the reality that death is inescapable and that life is precious, he treats it as a problem that he needs to fix, and it leads to him pushing away his friends and loved ones. But it's in realizing that he might lose everything he cares about in his life that he understands how precious life truly is and how he should work to protect every moment. This is what ultimately gives him an edge over the wolf, because while death isn't something that should be ignored, it's also not something that should be feared. And even though this is a very personal conflict with deep philosophical implications, it is served greatly by its portrayal through the wolf. Just because the wolf is supposed to be death doesn't mean that he's actually unbeatable. I remember a while ago seeing a bunch of people create these polls trying to decide who would win in a fight and pitting the wolf against every other character, and every time people would always say that the wolf would win. You guys realize that Puss beat the wolf at the end of the movie, right? So that means that Puss is the most powerful fictional character ever. Yeah, sure, Puss winning the fight doesn't really make logical sense, and the wolf just giving up is a little weird, but what matters most in this fight is that Puss won, and that he has changed for the better. Modern movies now try to make their main conflicts not have a villain figure, and then say that prejudice or generational trauma is the real villain, which is so much deeper and more realistic than having a bad guy to defeat. But in my opinion, the best way to portray things like depression or anxiety as dangerous is to be able to personify them into an antagonistic being. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of a villainous antagonist is for them to be overcome by our heroes, which is why stories usually make villains that are representations of larger than life problems that exist in the real world. Global warming, social inequalities, greed, and even cosmic threats are given shape through one individual that needs to be defeated. And by showing the hero work hard and train and shed blood, sweat, and tears to achieve this goal, we prove that there is no danger or threat that cannot be overcome. This triumph can inspire us to be better and motivates us to improve ourselves beyond what we thought was possible. If the wolf hadn't been a character in the movie and had just been Puss having random panic attacks and getting scared, then that would have been super lame. Puss would be a loser, and then the end of the movie would just be Puss overcoming his fear because he decides to feel better, and not because he actually had to spend effort and risk his life to stare at death in the face. Oh my god, he's so important. Does that mean he's better than Jack Horner? Fine! Alright, you know what? I'll admit it. The wolf is the best antagonist of the movie, alright? He's cool. He's really cool. And DreamWorks, you better not forget about this character. He's a part of the Shrek universe, so he better be allowed to be in other stuff. That's all I got for this video. Goodbye!